Truth Unveiled here, keeping you updated with the world around you. And we're going to be talking about Hurricane Harvey and the truth behind it because there's a whole lot your mainstream media is not telling you. And we're going to go over that and more to come. But we're going to start with just a brief overview of the hurricane and also a brief timeline too. But as you can see from this report from CNS, it says US has gone a record 142 months without a major hurricane strike. So that's close to 12 years. And this was as of the 24th, so almost a week ago, when Hurricane Harvey was only a tropical storm and expected to make landfall as of the past weekend. And according to an advisory from the National Hurricane Center, the storm was expected to produce huge amounts of rain in excess of 20 inches, according to some forecasts. Now, that's of course what they're telling you initially. But did your mainstream media know the truth about Hurricane Harvey before it actually even happened? Did they know that it would produce well over 50 inches of rain before it actually made landfall last week? Well, let's find out, because here's a report from weather.com where it says Harvey may become the first U.S. Category 3 hurricane landfall in almost 12 years, hurricane warnings for the Texas coast, and then we know that it increased to a Category 4. Now, according to the Washington Post, this hurricane is said to be the first Category 4 storm to hit the state since 1961, so well over 50 years ago. And there are even sources that are citing Hurricane Harvey to be one of the worst storms in history, actually, for the state of Texas and for America, with some sources citing this to be worse than Hurricane Katrina and even worse than the winter storm Sandy. And do you really think it's a surprise or a coincidence that barely 3 days after the solar eclipse this hurricane strikes, not to mention right after EarthX 2017, the major drill that FEMA and your government and Alphabet Soups conducted, and we'll be going over that later on in the video to come. So for those who are still saying that, oh, nothing happened after the solar eclipse, I beg to differ. Because what you're going to find out is that this is yet another martial law scenario and practice run. How? Because the governor declared a state of disaster for 30 counties, including Jefferson County, as of last week. And to make matters worse, due to the severity of the storm, there are more than 250,000 people in Texas that are left without power, and it's probably even more as of right now. And now they're telling you that the Houston area has broke records with well over 50 inches of rain that was reported due to this hurricane. And mind you, the hurricane, at first, it weakened over a period of time, but then it regained traction and regained strength and then hit the Texas, Louisiana areas. And because of all this, we have once again another problem reaction solution. Because yes, this is a man-made storm, and I'm going to prove that to you with actual government documentation in a moment to come. But we see how they've already caused the problem once again, and here they are offering their solutions with what? FEMA and the National Guard. And the first thing that Houston has started to do is impose curfew in this area. And here's a report that says Houston imposes overnight curfew to fight looting, break-ins, and quote, lowlives. Houston authorities imposed an overnight curfew, and this was as of a few days ago, that incensed that criminals impersonating law enforcement officers in the wake of Hurricane Harvey were victimizing the city's hardest hit residents. But we know exactly why they're doing this. And of course, here comes FEMA and all the other federal agencies to come into the quote-unquote rescue. And the National Guard of Texas has also been called in to mobilize for search and rescue operations in the Houston, Texas area and all of the other areas that have been affected by Hurricane Harvey. Now, this is from the Facebook page and the Facebook post of the 36th Sustainment Brigade of the Texas Army National Guard. And as you can see right here, it shows you videos and pictures of military convoys that are on their way to Texas, as you see right here. But you also see this phrase here, which I found very interesting and suspicious indeed, as the phoenix rises, the phoenix rising out of the ashes. You even see it on their logo too. What are they alluding to? Now here are those pictures up close that you can see right here. You can actually see the military vehicles and convoys that are moving in. And of course, what they're not going to tell you is that it's way more than just this. If you keep going, you can actually see them right here. You can see them once again right here, all lined up, ready to go. And many more are already on board, ready to go in these specific areas. Now, what they're telling you is that 1,000 more guard troops have been activated as, quote, unprecedented flooding has swamped Houston from Hurricane Harvey. But we know that there's actually way more than just this. This is what they're telling us, but we know the storm is much worse than they're actually reporting. And it just so happens that the exact same week of Hurricane Harvey, Trump decides to lift a ban on military gear to local police forces. So what this means is what? The militarization of the police. And the Attorney General, along with the Trump administration, quietly did this and just recently decided to do this. And this means now that local police stations, wherever they are in America, now have the so-called legal right to go and get militarized and have military vehicles and gear no matter where they are. And this comes from the USA Today, where it says the Trump administration lifted a controversial ban on the transfer of some surplus military equipment to police departments whose battlefield-style response to rioting in a St. Louis suburb 3 years ago prompted to halt to the program. And we know that's Problem Reaction Solution that's funded by Soros and all those other elite Zionist terrorists at the top. But then it says the new plan takes effect immediately and rolls back an Obama administration executive order that blocked armored vehicles, large caliber weapons, ammunition, and other heavy equipment from being repurposed from foreign battlefields to America's streets. And this is Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, who led the campaign for the program's reinstatement and outlined Trump's new executive order in an address to the Fraternal Order of Police, the nation's largest police union, suggesting that Obama's directive was a concession to political pressure applied by civil rights advocates. And they just so happened to reinstitute all of this around the same time as Hurricane Harvey? What perfect timing indeed. And recently, at the House Joint Resolution 76 that was passed this week, actually, Congress quietly passed a bill allowing warrantless searches of homes. So now the police can legally come into your home and search without a warrant. But we know they've already been planning that, and they've already been doing that before. And they do that when they stop people and pull people over with their cars. And this also just so happened to be passed the same exact week as Hurricane Harvey. Oh, no surprise or coincidence there whatsoever. And it's not just Texas that's feeling this also, because now there are also reports that a St. Louis region dam could also go off due to all of the floods and submerging that's also going on and taking place in this region. And it's not just Hurricane Harvey either, it's many other places worldwide that are being triggered and caused by flooding, monsoons, and even mudslides, as you're going to see from this report here, because it says attention is on Harvey, but flooding has killed thousands this month in other countries too. It says skies, streams, and seas have unleashed tragedies around the world this month, forcing us to reckon once more with the deadly power of weather and water. While we watch and react to the devastation wrought by the remnants of Hurricane Harvey across southeast Texas and Louisiana, we should also spare a thought for the floods that have each taken more than 1,000 lives in Sierra Leone and South Asia. Local officials in Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown, which is located in southwestern Africa, said this week that the death toll from floods and mudslides triggered by intense overnight rainfall, and this was as of the middle of the month, had surpassed 1,000. The combined death tolls from floods amid ongoing and unusually severe monsoon rains in Nepal, India, and Bangladesh have surpassed 1,200. And according to the United Nations, they claim that 41 million people in those three countries were affected in one way or another by the flood. If it wasn't bad enough already, as we already went over, Texas has already received a record 50 inches of rain, if not more than that. Not only that, though, but according to the director, Brian Long, FEMA's long predicted that the aftermath of the storm would require FEMA's involvement of years, and it also says that they're going to be in Texas for many years, and that, quote, this disaster is going to be a landmark event. On top of all of that, they're also saying that up to 20 more inches of rain could fall in the coming days, on top of the more than 30 inches in some places have already seen, and this is supposed to be as of this week. And of course, FEMA is already on the scene and they expect more than 450,000 Harvey disaster victims to file for assistance. So that's close to 500,000 people. And it says here that U.S. emergency management officials said that they were expediting federal resources to Texas to help with rescue efforts after Hurricane Harvey swamped coastal areas of the state and forced 30,000 people to seek refuge in temporary shelters. And according to the FEMA's administrator Brock Long, he said that close to 1 million people were expected to seek disaster assistance due to flooding after Harvey made landfall during the weekend before weakening to a tropical storm status, the same one who's also saying that FEMA is going to remain in Texas for many years, and this just so happens to be right after EarthX 2017, and according to Trump approved an emergency request for Louisiana where severe flooding also was expected. Quote, we are not out of the woods yet, not by a long shot, and this is according to Homeland Security Secretary Elaine Duke, who said this at a news briefing. Quote, Harvey is still a dangerous and historic storm. So much so to the point that ex-FEMA boss Michael Brown is saying that Harvey is worse than Katrina, with other reports showing us that Harvey floodwaters have overflowed Houston reservoirs and separated the levee breach. And of course, another organization that's getting involved is Walmart, because they already have thousands of Walmart trucks that are going and helping victims, that are claiming to help victims. And what perfect timing too, because didn't Walmart just recently install and enable facial recognition programs into their stores? And isn't it interesting and suspicious indeed that Walmart just so happens to sound like martial law? What are they getting ready for? Because also the real truth that they don't want you to know, and many people who have been affected by this storm on Facebook and many other social media places who have tried to speak out about this but have since gotten silenced, but I'm going to speak out about it too. Many minority groups in the areas and so-called blacks that have been affected in these areas are not getting the same amount of treatment and adequate treatment as many others. And we're seeing a repeat of Hurricane Katrina, where many so-called minority groups are not getting the full support, and the government and the alphabet soups are purposefully not sending in aid to many of these areas in so-called low-income neighborhoods. Why is that the case? Is this another man-made attempt and another man-made storm that's been planned ahead of time by your government because they know exactly what they're doing, in another genocide attempt to wipe out the population and certain peoples of the population, another form of Operation Depopulation? Because yes, this hurricane was in fact man-made and is in fact a man-made storm, and I'm going to prove that right now. Now, this is a report that comes from the 1960s that has to do with weather modification from who? None other than NASA, the liars themselves. And this once again proves that your government and all of your alphabet soups have been working for how many years, how many decades, and have been teaming up in order to modify the weather and to create man-made storms, as you see with Hurricane Harvey, for what? Problem, reaction, solution, and to further their plans of the New World Order, Phoenix rising out of the ashes, as you just saw even with the National Guard. And you see there are many other organizations that are involved with these things, such as the DoD, Department of Defense, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Health, Education and Welfare, Department of the Interior, Department of the State, the Federal Aviation Agency, along with the National Science Foundation, and they have another report on weather modification, which we're also going to look at later on, NASA themselves, Department of Agriculture, Bureau of the Budget, and the Smithsonian, and many others. Now, I've gone over this report before that talks about chemtrails, and it also talks about how they modify the weather when it comes to seeding the clouds and cloud seeding with other materials such as silver, iodide,